Hi, good morning, everybody. We got with us today an awesome training here with Paul Duncan. Paul Duncan, for those of you guys who aren't aware of Paul, you're going to be a huge fan after today. But Paul Duncan is a Los Angeles-based songwriter. Today, a McDonald's parking lot-based songwriter, but usually a Los Angeles-based songwriter who has found success in multiple formats, from CCM to country. His songs have appeared on a number of top Christian albums, including 4 songs on Lauren Daigle's 2018 album Look Up Child, 2 songs on her How Can It Be album, and 7 songs on Jordan Feliz's Future album. He's had over 25, count them, 25 radio singles, 6 number 1s, and 6 additional top 5s in the CCM genre. Great little quote from Lauren Daigle herself. She says, Paul Duncan is our engineer of lyrical concepts. He writes all day long, no matter where he is. He'll have pages of poems and lyrics. He's one of those people that is a true muso when it comes to lyrics. So that's high praise from Lauren Daigle, who is no slouch herself.
I'm not sure I believe all that stuff you just read, Seth. I'm not. I, I'll take your word for it, but
The internet's always true. So the internet's always
yeah.
right.
Hey, that's high praise from Lauren. Let's start there. How did you guys originally get connected? Because I assume that wasn't the first thing you ever did in your life musically, right?
No, it wasn't. But I had a relationship with a guy named Paul Mayberry, who's a record producer and drummer, and we had been doing some writes over Skype, and this is before the pandemic, before remote writing was as popular, I guess, as it is now. And he just said, "Hey, there's this girl who's just signed. I think she just signed a record deal. Her name is Lauren Daigle. Um, he hadn't even met her yet. He said, "Would you be willing to join this write?" So I was like, "Sure, yeah, sounds fun." And I had not had a whole lot of activity yet in my career at that point, and we were, Lauren was kind of new to what she was doing. I was kind of new to it as well. So, but the first song we wrote over that remote connection was a song called "Once and for All," which ended up being, I think, the last song on that "How Can It Be" record.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was. I think just by virtue of building that relationship really early, it allows us to kind of build some trust, get those songs in the first record, and then when the time came for the second record, there was already just a back and forth and a level of understanding. So it was really natural to come in and write those songs for Look Up Child. And but yeah, if I would say that if Lauren had already been Lauren as we know her, I certainly never would have gotten in that door at that moment. It was really providential that we were both kind of climbing and we're about the same step of the ladder at the same time. So
Yeah, I would love to double click on that because, yeah, Lauren was not the Lauren that we know today when you first started writing. And that's one of the big things that we try to encourage up and coming writers. We've got, today we're talking specifically about the Christian genre, but it doesn't matter what genre you're trying to write in, getting in with people who are at the same rung of the ladder, that I think was a really good way that you just put that.
yeah.
And is that kind of like, if you're talking to a new songwriter who's trying to get into the business, how do you advise, like, because I know everybody wants to get in the room,
Yeah.
you want to write up, you want to try to get in the room with people who are better than you, but in that season, how do you give advice to a new writer who's maybe kind of grappling with that tension?
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to something I think is kind of even a broader concept about community. I remember you and I talking about this years ago, Seth, about, team building and how I don't really think any one creative rises alone. I think it always happens like a wave on the ocean. And if you're near each other and that same wave rises, then a lot of you will be able to rise together. And sometimes that's co-writers, sometimes that's artists. Um, we live in a time now where, as we're seeing right now, you don't have to live in the same town to be connected to people. Um, and I think there's a distinction too. We do always want to write up. Even now, I want to write up, but it's not necessarily with somebody who's bigger than me. I do want to be working with people who are better than me, though. And recognizing the craft and someone that may be a few steps along in terms of what they're able to do, finding people that have skills that maybe you don't have, and maybe you have some skills that they don't have, and complementarian relationships. But I'm a big believer in making as many connections as you possibly can. And when those relationships are authentic, um, when your connections begin to move up, then naturally you'll begin to move up with them. Um, so I'm a big believer in that. I think trying to do it as it's a lonely pursuit to try to do it as a lone wolf. I mean, I think even finding things like this, which you guys are doing here today, are incredibly valuable in terms of finding and building that community.
Yeah. Well, and you've been able to do it in a unique way because a lot of your success has been in the Christian space, some outside as well. And you haven't even lived in the geographic hub. You've been able to do that all from completely across the country.
Right.
Um, can you speak to the thought process behind that? Because I know a lot of people are always asking the question of, do I have to move to Nashville?
You know, I was definitely advised to move to Nashville. And I would say that it probably didn't speak to the best part of my personality, which I was like, well, you said I need to move to Nashville. I'm definitely not going to do that. You know, it's a little bit of a contrarian approach. And I found out that it made it difficult. It certainly, and I have to come to Nashville. I can't just not ever be in Nashville. Um, and I've thought many times that momentum would have been easier and I would have been able to move faster if I'd lived here. You know, you're going to church with people, your social our social environment tends to be people that you're working with in Nashville. Honestly, I had to say that part of it, I was glad to preserve a bit of a life outside of the music business, which is a funny thing to say considering I live in LA. I still live in a media center, but um,
You want to take that?
to have a life is so important to being a creative. To have a real friends, real relationships, real experiences. And I never wanted all of my thought process to be connected to music and the music business. I just want to be with my kids and be with my wife. And so there is something about the separation that I think is beneficial to me creatively, but it certainly has been a challenge from a business standpoint, making connections. There are times I think that living in Nashville would have made some things easier, but I go back and forth all the time. Even creatively, coming from a different headspace, I think kind of can make my perspective unique in a writing session, because the things I'm hearing and the things I'm seeing and where it's you are what you eat. It's the same thing with music as it is with your body and the diet that you take in. The songs you put out will be products of the things that go in. And so I have California has been a good environment for me to live and receive and marinate and meditate and all the things that we have to do as creatives. So it's a mixed bag, man, for sure.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I love that too. Something we talk about so much is just like blooming where you're planted. And I love that you say that like where you're planted is important, not simply for the people you're around and all of that, but the perspective it brings all
Yes.
around. Like that's such a helpful insight. So you're writing, you're distant for a lot of those writes. Can you tell us a little bit about like that first hit or like the first song that really kind of started to elevate your career and what that process looked like for you?
Well, it's kind of I guess a couple of moments. The first song that I had that was notable, I guess, was I had a song that I wrote in 2003, and it was a country song with an artist named Cherie Austin, and it was kind of out of nowhere. It was my first co-write, to be honest with you, and it ended up on the radio. That's, as we all know, that's not what normally happens. And
Nope.
I sort of came out of that one going, "Oh, this isn't this is how it's gonna go. I'm gonna go write songs, and then they're gonna be other. This is gonna be great." I didn't have another cut till 2011. I had 8 years of self-funding trips to Nashville, trying to meet everybody I could. I mean, I had received an ASCAP award for the song. It did well at radio, and I thought that my phone was going to start ringing, and it didn't. Um, and that was an 8 year rude awakening, and I fought and I scrapped. And I, what's interesting, the whole time my focus was on what was not happening. I wasn't aware that I was becoming a better writer. I wasn't thinking about what all of that wood shedding and all of that crying and all of that, the ups and the downs. I didn't realize what they were building in me, but I was very frustrated. Um, and when I met Paul Mayberry, who I had mentioned before, he was on a trip to LA doing a like a trip for film and TV. And we ended up writing something that I don't think the thing we wrote together the day he came out to LA was that great. But we found that we worked well together. And so he was the first guy to say, hey, I'm producing some records in Nashville. Would you be willing to Skype in? Again, Skype, if we all remember. Zoom has replaced it, but Skype was around. And so I think my first cut in the Christian world was with an artist named Meredith Andrews. And that was an album that Paul was producing. And I mean, I didn't even know the song was going to make the record. I think I saw a MySpace video that he made of tracking drums, and I could hear through the bleed in his headphones. I said, I think that's our song. And I was so excited because somebody was finally recording something. And it wasn't, you know, to your question, that wasn't the biggest song in the world, but it was a big deal to me. Because it was validating. It was, hey, somebody actually wants to put this song on a record. And after 8 years, it was like, oh, amazing. So that was the song is called Start With Me. And that was a really big moment for me. I think probably a song called Beloved that I wrote with Jordan Feliz was the first time that I found myself on Christian radio and thought, oh, this is a song that's actually making an extended impact. And that was probably 2014 or 15, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
But I love that so much. And I love that you acknowledged kind of that 8-year period of time, because it's not linear and the journey looks so different for everyone, which is just, again, something that I know those of you on this call we've talked about all the time. You mentioned, I loved how you said it. You said you couldn't see it then, but there were so many things that were growing in you along the way. Like you didn't know you were becoming a better songwriter. And so I was wondering if you could just go back and touch on that. Like, what are the things, if you can even pinpoint them now, that were growing in you, either personally or also in your craft itself? What were some of those things?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, if anything makes me quote unquote qualified to have a conversation like this, I want everybody to know that it's not the yeses I've received, it's the nos. The things you learn from the nos are where all the wisdom comes from. And the time in the desert, you know, I came back from the desert stronger than when I entered. But country music being my entryway into songwriting was as a lyricist, it was a very exacting, uncompromising environment. The rules that were applied, the things I couldn't get away with. I know what this line means. Well, your listener won't know what this line means. There was a lot of that kind of thing. Consistency in maintaining, you know, are you singing to this person in first person or second person? Because you called him you in the verse and you said he in the chorus. Like those type of things that I didn't know. I was just a loose cannon of a creative. So the understanding of a lyrical and narrative thread and how important that is. Believability. I heard things in rights that I was just like, what? Like I remember hearing things like, that sounds too songwritery. And I was like, I'm a songwriter. Like, how can I make it sound not songwritery? And I heard those type of things began to become my language. And once I understood what my co-writers meant by that, then I would apply that and say, yeah, that sounds songwritery, or that sounds understanding just the things you guys talk about a lot, I'm sure, about taking a chorus and having it lift from where the verse was. Those were not things that I knew. I was listening to music and I was trying to reproduce what I heard, but I had never received any instruction. So to me, those 8 years were like 2 4-year college periods where I had real instructors telling me, you know, what to do. I thought the songs would go somewhere, but they didn't. But I got the instruction for sure.
I'd love to even just talk about that period, and I do ultimately want to fast forward to your success and what you've learned from that. But I do also think that we learn as much, like you said, from the no's. So that had to be, you know, 8 years without having a whole lot happen. Like, what kept you going? Like, what was the daily wake up? Like, what if you can sort of transport yourself back there? Like, what did it feel like to be in that season? And how did you just keep going and keep doing it?
Yeah, I mean, So the song came out in '03. We got the ASCAP award in '04. So that knocked out 1 year where I was like, I was still riding on it. So now I got 7 to account for. Um, I think I always thought it was right around the bend. And in some cases it kind of was. There were songs that were on hold. And sometimes a song on hold can inject you with enough adrenaline, keep you going. I was producing some smaller, like independent worship projects and things like that, because I was a worship leader the whole time as well. Um, so I was involved in some independent records. I started my own band. We made 2 or 3 records in that process. I was trying to get a record deal, and I mean, the number of dreams I had at the same time were, there's a lot of irons in the fire. I got married in there. My wife started a nonprofit. There was a lot of things going on, and again, a lot of it was about living a life. But I would still, I probably came to Nashville every 2 or 3 months, and I would come with a bag full of ideas. Um, and then I'd come home and wait for somebody else to demo them and hope that I got back demos that I liked. And then I had I had one guy who was a friend of a father of a friend of mine who was a bit of an advocate at a small independent um, publishing company. He kept saying, if you have something good, send it to me, and maybe I'll pitch it for you. And so I'd come to him with the song, and he'd give me some feedback. And it's almost like a gerbil with that little water thing. You just get to drop out every now and then. And I feel like I had a hope bottle like that, and I'd occasionally get a hope drop. And I think those things, I could squeeze a lot of 2 months out of a hope drop, man. Um, and I had a very, very close call with the song that George Strait put on hold. And I thought that was going to be my second wind in country music. And um, it was like a last minute where they went in and he couldn't find the key he liked on it, and they didn't cut it in the studio. It was like, and I almost quit. I almost quit at that point because it was so close and so disappointing. And that was probably '08 or '09. I think that was probably the lowest point. Um, when you can talk about disappointment and how constructive it is. You can talk about that 10 years later really easily, but in the moment, it's disappointment is nothing but disappointing. And so I certainly rest. And my wife too was like, man, yeah, I don't know. Like, you're working so hard. Um, and so we decided that if something hadn't happened by the time I turned 40, and that was just my number, by the way, because just where I was at. And I signed my first publishing deal at 40. And I see God's hand in it. I think he let me have that metric, and then he answered it. Um and I know 40 to some people I talk to sounds, like a million years away, and then to some people 40 sounds like 20 years in the past. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, your songs speak for you. And there's there's nothing more important to songwriting than experience. So that was a very important lesson for me. And I think in a sense, success was held for me to a time when I would have been able to handle it a little better. And I think that was providential as well. So um, I think I've strayed pretty far afield from your question by now.
No, it's so good, and I don't know if you can see the chat, but a lot of people resonating, getting a ton out of this stuff. But no, yeah, you touched on it a little bit. But Petri in the chat was asking as well too. What were some of the ways that you saw God's hand through all of it? You kind of hit on it a little bit, and it
Yeah.
was like, here's a drop of hope here, here's a drop there. Sometimes, like, we'll kind of transition this conversation into what we're talking about today, which is
Mm.
writing for Christian music. Sometimes I feel like we wrongly conflate um, God breathing on things or God's blessing with whether something is actually working or not. And that drop of hope, like, is that even a God thing? Or is that just like enough? He lets us have enough of that, or is he's the way I've always thought of it, and I want to hear your perspective on this. Is God it's like God in our life doesn't call us to be successful. He calls us to be faithful.
Mm.
And I think he lets us kind of have this wide range of stuff. In my experience, it hasn't been go here and write this song and do this specific thing and meet this specific person. There are 2 or 3 times in my life I have a very specific God saying do this, and it turned out incredibly well. But
Yeah.
most of the time it's been you don't really know. Like you kind of have the autonomy. So I'm just curious, yeah, what were some of the ways that you saw God's hand through that season? And I guess even through to today.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel like I just talk in metaphors all the time. I have one right now, but I feel like God's hand to me is invisible through the windshield, but I can see it really well in the rearview mirror. Um, and when I look back, I can see it. And at the time, I don't know where I saw it, to be honest with you. I mean, I was, um, you know, how much of it is wrapped up in wanting to be somebody, and how much of it is wrapped up in wanting to make a name and wanting to leave a mark, and then how much of it is wrapped up in wanting to follow His will. I questioned that a lot at the time because I said, you know, if I was trying to do something that wasn't fun, it'd be easy to call it God's will. I guess God wants me digging this ditch because I wouldn't want to do it for any other reason. But songwriting's fun and it's rewarding. And I thought, am I called to this or do I just love it? And I still don't know how to really draw the distinction there because I think that's what sometimes a calling feels like. But I also think that if I had given up, that God would still have had His hand on my life. I think He would have still blessed me. It's not that I missed, it wouldn't have been like, oh, I spent the rest of my life missing His will for me. Because I think He's so much more concerned with our character than with our career. And if that's what's being built, then I guess you're in the will of God. So, but yeah, at the time, I mean, I saw trickles of hope and positivity, and I certainly saw my songs getting better. And I think maybe even just seeing that, where I go, man, my own song gave me goosebumps, and that wasn't always the case. Sometimes I'd write a song, and in the math in my head would go, "This is a good song. I can tell the rhyme scheme is good," and that, you know. But when I'd hear a demo back or hear, especially when you hear somebody else sing your song, it it, it really delivers in a different way. So yeah, when I see it back now, I mean, when I see the relationships mostly, I look back and I see, oh, that's why I met that person then, and that's you know when I met Paul Mayberry, for instance, he's been an incredibly important thread in my life and career. We've done a ton of things together. When we wrote that first song, all I cared about was that song. That's all I knew. And um, I was just like, shoot, nothing happened with that song. That's a drag. Now looking back, I'm like, that first day was divinely appointed. And so again, the rearview mirror shows me quite a bit. But at the time, it's just you're just trying to put one foot in front of the other, and I could only see about 6 inches ahead, and probably for the best, honestly. If you told me in 2003, hey, it's going to take 8 years, I would have been like, what? Go do I don't know if I have the patience for that, and I didn't know I had the patience for that until I had the patience for it.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, something we talk about really all the time is just like those baby steps, how important each one of those little steps are. Like, however you worded the little hope gerbil thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Such a good picture.
Good picture.
never said that before.
Love it. It's really quite accurate. I feel like
That's the song you need to write today. Gerbil of
Hope
Hope.
gerbil.
Hope gerbil.
gerbil. There you
Yeah.
go. But yeah, just the importance of those baby steps. And I feel like sometimes whatever that little step is, sometimes it feels like that it's off of a, like into a canyon, off of a cliff, this giant
Yeah,
thing. Sometimes it feels so incredibly small. You wonder, like, is that even worth doing? But like
yeah,
seeing the importance of both of those, and love too how you just touched on what we're really called to, even more so than just like a specific vocation or this or that. There's I don't know if anyone in this call has come across it, but Mike Donahue from 10th Avenue North recently posted something on Instagram that's
saw
kind of
that.
blown, and just talks about like it's him retelling like a student at a youth thing coming up to him and being like, when did you know like music was God's will for your life? And he goes, oh, it's not. And
Yeah.
basically just going on to, talk about, because, I'm called to be faithful. Like you said, I'm called to love others. I'm called to love God. I'm called to, do all these different things. And so anyways, love how you started touching on that.
Well, and, I don't know if you have a question. I don't mean to cut you off,
No, go ahead.
but one of the things that I've been really on lately, I mentioned in a conversation with somebody yesterday, is, and I don't know if this is counterproductive to the conversation at hand in terms of, making strides from a career standpoint, but we talk about the gift of music. And I think sometimes it's important to recognize that music is a gift, full stop. More so even than a tool, because a tool is only defined by what you accomplish with it. And music is a gift, full stop. The ability to write a song, the ability to put your thoughts into art, to order your world for 3.5 minutes is a gift. And I think in those times of futility, I mean, I still had the songs, and the songs were a gift, and they were a gift to me. They were a gift to my co-writers. Sometimes I played them for people, and they affected them. And just because they didn't affect 10,000 or a million people or whatever, music is a gift. And the fact that each one of you has the ability and the inclination to do this, that you see the world through an artistic lens, that is a beautiful thing to have been given. That's a beautiful way to walk the earth. And that is one of those things I think that also keeps a hope flame alive. Um, if your music is not always viewed through the lens of what did it accomplish and what did the song do? Did the song end up with a gold, a silver, or a bronze, or did it medal at all? It's a song. And aside from a human being, there's nothing more beautiful to me on the planet than a song. And so if you get to make them, my word, what a gift. So
That's so good. No, I love that so much. And honestly, it leans right into what I was going to ask, which was just like, how then do you define like success for yourself in all of it? Because how do you even do that? Like, I don't know. I'll just leave it
yeah.
there. Whatever comes to your mind. But
I mean, Seth, you may agree with this that like it sometimes when you have things that work and love, I mean, I wish I had Seth's bio to read right now. But it can almost blur those lines, that you have to fight for that sense of satisfaction in the music itself. I think at times when you get used to things being on the radio, or then you start to go, well, that's what I need. That's what I need my songs to do. And so the question you're asking is one that I continually ask myself. How do I define success? What does this mean? When I'm in the middle of a writing trip right now, and today will be my sixth song written on the trip. And I won't know anything about these songs for 6 months or more. Um, and so sometimes like I'll go home, my wife will be like, "How was the week?" I don't know. Like I think I feel like the songs were great. I had a good time. Um, and I have to kind of hold on to that as at the end of a week to say it's a good week, you know? And I think I define it happens in these sort of lightning bolt moments in a session when all of a sudden I go, well, I've never heard that line before. I've never heard that said before. That made me sit up in my chair. That feels like success to me, I think, because I know that then the song has a chance, and I know that song, I know that God is still pouring out. I know that the spigot is still open. All those things. Um, because yeah, sometimes when something does happen with a song, it's so far from the time that you wrote it, um, that it's strange. There's very little instant gratification in our pursuit. But to answer you really, outside of the sort of heart piece of it, I mean, having a song be on the radio is amazing. Um, Knowing that a lot of people heard it is amazing, and incredibly validating. And there are times when a song felt like it should have been. I mean, I'll counteract everything that Seth read to say. I think I wrote Natalie Grant's lowest charting single in history. Um, I I've had several songs that have bubbled under and done nothing. I had several songs that got swallowed up in the pandemic. The 2020, they were a little too heartfelt for how everybody was feeling at the time. And so I've had to walk away and go, all right, are those songs successes? Because the number of steps you have to clear to get the artist to love it enough to cut it, and then to get the label interested in enough to say we're going to put it on the record, then to have the radio team say this sounds like a single, then to have the radio stations add it. I mean, that's 4 successes right there. But then when it does nothing at radio, you're all tended to look at the song and say, that song's a bummer. I'm really trying to fight that, because I'm like, well, that song had 5 hurdles to clear and it cleared 4 of them. That's pretty good. But some of these become the song about which we do not speak because they're so disappointing for everybody. I think it's important to establish a definition of success that nobody else gives to you. Because you can walk away satisfied if you know that you poured into it and you know that it was the right song. And sometimes the moment, sometimes the competition, I hate to even say it like that, but sometimes the other songs just keep it from doing what you thought it was meant to do. So I have to keep redefining my metric for success.
Yeah, that's so good. And I like how you put it earlier that it's character over career. And ultimately, I have to think that if our character is getting better over time, that ultimately is success. The
Yeah.
career stuff's going to be a roller coaster. It's, like you said, for every number one and line you write in your bio, there's 1,000 things that did the exact opposite of that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how it's in my story. It's in your story. It's in anybody who's ever tried to do this as a career.
Yeah.
I would love to just tap into the character piece because I really do believe, like, to me, the lightning bolt moments that you mentioned in the rights, like, those don't just come to anybody. They come to people who are in the right place to receive the right message from God in a way that nobody has heard it before. I really
Mm.
believe.
Mm.
So if you're meeting with a new young writer who's coming up, moving to Nashville, wanting to become the next Jason Ingram or whoever, in the Christian
Mhm.
space, how would you mentor or guide them as far as character development? Because I feel like that is as important. Well, no, it's way more important than
Yeah.
the craft development. I know
Yeah,
that's a very broad question, but you can take it
you're
any way.
right though. I mean, I think usually when something goes south in a write, it's because of something that has very little to do with music. Um, it's it's often ego that's getting in the way of the process, um, or insecurity, which is kind of ego. It's like ego's mirror image, I guess. Um, and finding that, I mean, having an identity that's rooted in Christ is something that I think allows you to walk in and out of a situation and not just always say, I'm living and dying by how well I think I did today. Um, because those things can inject themselves into the write as well. If you're trying so hard to be heard because you're worried that people won't think you're good enough unless you contribute to more lines in the song. Um, that's where your character issues and your writing issues become really kind of tightly wound and inseparable. Um, and having a sense of contentment and a sense of self that comes from somewhere else, that comes from your spiritual grounding, um, from your experiences and your confidence in the Lord and where He's put you, it can keep you, honestly, in a place that makes you fun to write with because you're relaxed and relaxation is so important to creativity. And then just being trustworthy. A lot of things are said in rights. People telling their life stories, in there. And I think being able to be friends and be a trusted friend in a right is really important. And I think when we begin to look at each other as opportunities, and you represent a step to me, you are either my competition or you are my opportunity, then I think those things show up in the way we work together, and I think they're detrimental to moving forward creatively. So it's it's all very linked, I think, there's some honor and integrity elements that can really lift a creative experience and a creative relationship, and conversely, some deficits that can really get in the way.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the character side of things, which arguably is the most important part. I would be remiss if we didn't dive into the craft a little bit while we're on here, and we have you as a black belt in such craft. What are some of the hallmarks? I know these things kind of change from year to year and, trend to trend, but in terms of somebody that's trying to sit down and develop the craft of writing Christian music, even more specifically, because you're such a great lyricist, what are some of the best practices for people to be doing to develop as a Christian lyricist, to have songs that have depth, they're obviously theologically sound, or maybe not obviously, but they're theologically sound,
Yeah.
and they straddle the balance of also being commercial somehow? It's a tricky thing to do because we're all
Yes.
writing about the same thing. It's one subject matter since the beginning of time. But
Yep.
how, as a lyricist, can one get to the point of mastering that craft?
I think that's the biggest challenge. What you just pinpointed is that, when you're writing a country or a pop song, you can write, I love her, but she doesn't love me. She loves me, but I don't love her. I love her, but she's leaving. And with Christian music, we got I love him and he loves me. And that's basically it. Like the target is super narrow. But what I do think that we have is we have degrees um to which we lean in certain directions. And I would say this, we have two things. We have the dilemma and we have the deliverance. And we are writing in varying degrees about those two things. And one of the things that I'm always trying to kind of ascertain in a write are, what are we leaning into? Are we leaning into the dilemma? Are we leaning into the deliverance? If you look at a Brandon Lake song, there's very little dilemma in those songs. Brandon wants to come out of the gate. I'll praise when I'm sure. I'll praise on the valley. I'll praise on the mountain. And that's sort of his artistic identity. I'd say, Phil Wickham is kind of that way as well. But you look at a song like Living Hope, how great the chasm that lay between us. Oh, there's the dilemma. How high the mountain I couldn't climb. Desperation. Oh, that's where it begins to shift. I called your name, spoke your name into the night, into the darkness. There's a deliverance, right? So that to me is a big part of, especially when I'm working with artists, where is that artist on that spectrum? How much time do we want to spend talking about? I don't, sometimes for me, an answer doesn't matter unless I know there's a question. And so lyrically, it's important for me to explore the question. And it's important for me to explore the darkness so that when the light appears in the chorus, it matters. And and I think that's one reason that my writing has gravitated a little more into the CCM space, because I think it's a challenge for me sometimes in worship to not present the dilemma. Um, and some writers are really good at that, at coming out and just being like, no, man, the joy of the Lord is my strength, from downbeat to the end of the song. So that's a big thing that I'm always trying to keep my finger on the pulse of. The other one is like, how you look at a song like a song I wrote with Lauren called Hold On to Me. And Hold On to Me is, I mean, it's a song that, like, it appears on the CCLI charts. It's used in churches from time to time, but it never says God in it. It never says Jesus. Um, that's who we were writing about. It wasn't an intent to be opaque. But sometimes as a lyricist, you want to allow for the listener to play a role. And the listener to be able to inject their own story into the proceedings. And sometimes specificity can be the enemy of that. And so from an artistic standpoint, it's also like, well, how far is the needle over to, I'm going to sing, Let Me Tell You About My Jesus, which is the needle all the way over to say, this is who we're talking about. And then the other side of it, a for king and country song sometimes will leave a little bit more to the art of it all. So as a writer, I want to be able to function in all of those different spaces. And if I see, if I recognize something that I need to grow in, one of them probably being writing a song without a dilemma. I go, okay, well, that's something that I need to grow. I need to listen to music. How are they achieving that? How are they doing that while staying dynamic? I love Brandon Lake's music. I never get bored when I listen to Brandon Lake. Even though he's keeping, he'll have a song like Count 'Em, which is like, there's a weight, certainly a weight to that lyric. And there's some really great. Also, the other thing, we're dealing with pretty timeless language, and we're dealing with a lot of phrases that are easy to reuse. And I'm always on the hunt for how can I use I'm not done talking about grace. We can't ever be done talking about grace, but we might be done rhyming it with face. Like, I think there are ways in which we just got to figure out ways to use these words. And sometimes it's like, I look at it, I say, hey, I want to talk about this, but I don't want it to be the last word in the line, because then I'm forced into some rhymes that we all know about. I really think in rhymes first. And so I try to end my lines with unconventional words, because that will drive me to unconventional rhymes. And then if I have any content that I feel like is, more traditional, if I can, I like to lean that toward the center of the line, because I'm not tempted to go, when life hurts me, I know I got your mercy. Like, I see that rhyme coming a mile away. But if that makes sense, like I usually enter the back screen door as a lyricist rather than come in the front. I want to find what the last line of the line is, and so reverse engineer.
I love that. So much gold in everything you just said. Let's all give Paul a nice big thank you, virtual thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Made It in Music podcast. And be sure to check out our other episodes where we unpack hundreds of hot topics with some of the top music industry pros, both here in Nashville and all over the world. Subscribe to make sure that you automatically get future episodes, and leave us a review if you loved it. It would really help us out. Or send an email to support@fullcirclemusic.com if you have ideas for how we can improve the show. If you would like to become a Songchasers member and attend our training sessions live, head over to joinsongchasers.com to learn more. You also get additional exclusive training from music industry professionals. You get our royalty-free custom tracks from Seth Mosley. You get song reviews from me and my team, and you get access to a custom social media network we created exclusively for songwriters and musicians. There's nothing else like it on the internet. Head to joinsongchasers.com to learn how to join, and check out madeitinmusic.com for more content and episodes from this podcast. See you in the next episode.